Happy New Year. Hope you've had a great time of celebrating with your family and friends over this Christmas holiday season. It's been a really good time here for us at Dayspring. We've had some great services together and through our Christmas music on the 14th, and then our Christmas Eve services, and then the 2 Sundays there around those. So it's just been a really good time together, gathering as a church congregation and just worshiping God together in the different ways and just celebrating the Christmas time. It's just that I know for you, if it's same as me, it's really a neat time of the year because I get to hang out with my friends and especially my family, and just kind of have a reminder of how much God loves us, that He would come here and make Himself known to us in a way that we could relate to Him. And I know you've enjoyed that and had a great time with that. And now it's time for us to move into a new year. Believe it or not, this Sunday will be January the 4th. The first Sunday of the new year, 2015, is here. And we're getting ready to enter into it in a really great way. On Sunday, January the 4th, we're going to be celebrating the Lord's Supper together as a congregation. And that gives us a really neat time of kind of just pulling together all that's happened during the Christmas season and being reminding of what Christmas was about. Christmas is, we reminded at Christmas Eve, it was not about a baby in a manger as much as it is about a Savior on a cross and placed in a tomb. And now that tomb is empty, the resurrection of Jesus and the gospel, that Christmas is all about the gospel and what the gospel brings to me and you and what the gospel is for us individually, but also about our mission and our task that God has given us as His followers to share the gospel with each and every one. And as we say it here at Dayspring, to give every man, woman, and child access to the gospel in every way we can so that they can hear it and see it. And so Sunday's going to be a time for us to kind of come back together after all the holiday stuff that's going on. We've been moving and traveling and here and there. And so I'm looking forward to kind of all of us being back together again. And I know that's true for you and your small group as well, because you haven't met for the last couple of weeks and people have kind of been in and out. So now Sunday's going to be a time for you to be back together again. And it's going to be a really good study, because what we're going to be doing Sunday, Brett's going to be sharing a message, and that is we involve the Lord's Supper in that, communion. Brett's going to be sharing a message that's really going to focus on worship and what the essence of worship is and what the essence of worship should be. And that's exactly what you're going to be talking about as well in your own campus small group. And I can't think of a better way to start off the new year than to get focused in on what worship is really all about. And so that's what we're going to be looking at, and that's what you're going to be studying and sharing with your small group. And I think it's going to be a really great way to kind of kick off the new year. Now, if you didn't pick up a hard copy of your outline for your lesson on Sunday, or your manuscript, you should have received an email already that has that. We'll attach that to this video link as well. So you can go ahead and print that out and get it ready and get it in front of you there. And I'm just going to kind of walk you through it a little bit and point out some things and hopefully help you as you get ready to prepare to lead and to teach your own campus small group. Now, let me just say a couple of things up front and kind of remind us that we're starting off the new year in this. These coaching videos are simply that. They're coaching videos. We're not going to teach the lesson to you or for you. We've got such capable leaders and teachers, and I'm so grateful for what each of you do. And I know that you prepare diligently every Sunday to carry out that in your own campus small group. And as we repeatedly remind ourselves, the on-campus and off-campus small groups are just very vital to the discipleship strategy here at Dayspring, because that's where we incorporate and we encourage and we help live out and do life with others and do God's life with others. And so these small group settings are really important for what we're seeking to accomplish here in helping us all grow closer to God, closer to one another, and to be involved in carrying out the mission that He's given us. And so these videos are simply that they're to help you, and hopefully that's what they do. And let me just remind you, in the format of those, there are some things where you're going to see where it says "say this" or "state this," and remember that those are there for your help. You don't have to say them verbatim; just make them your own. Or if they don't fit you, fine, just don't use them because they're simply there to be of assistance to you in whatever way they can. And we're certainly not trying to dictate exactly what you say or how you say it. What we're trying to do is give you some helps as you carry out that responsibility that you have as a facilitator, as a leader, as a teacher. The teaching tips in the shaded areas, I want to encourage you when you're reading through the manuscript, looking through that lesson, take note of those. There's always, I have found to be some really good stuff in there. Sometimes it's things that I can use. Sometimes it makes me think of something else to use in place of that. But they're there to be prompters for you and to be helpful for you as you're thinking through how to best communicate to your group what we're going to be talking about and the truth of the scripture passage that we're studying. And by the way, you know your group better than anyone. You know your group better than me. You know your group than any of us that do these coaching videos. So we're not trying to, the purpose of these, I guess, is we're not trying to tell you how to teach to your group, because you know how to do that better. Because you know what how your group will respond, and how to communicate, and what the makeup of your group is. So use these coaching videos in that way, and again, just make them your own. So let's kind of go through it here, and I'm just going to walk through and mention a couple of things to help you. And as I said, it's such a good lesson, and you're going to enjoy this in preparing, but it's also going to be a very encouragement and challenging time for your small group as well. There are three major points that we're going to be emphasizing in this lesson this Sunday. And let me just go ahead and kind of give those to you right now. The first one is, in order for worship to be worth something, it should be focused on someone worth worshiping. We're going to be focusing on who we worship, the person, what we worship. In other words, our worship should be that directed to one who is worthy of our worship. The second point is, in order for worship to be worth something, it should involve offering something worth offering. It's going to talk about the value of how we worship. The value of our worship is going to also indicate the value of the one that we are worshiping. And then the third point is this: in order for worship to be worth something, it should result in other people worshiping God too. In other words, when we worship God, it ought to reveal the one that we're worshiping to others. On page 1, you've got the overview, and we've kind of already talked about that, which is simply it's going to be about worship, and that's what we're going to be talking about in the services. Brett's going to be speaking on, and then that's what you're going to be talking about in your own campus small group. So if you're at 9 o'clock when you move in there, you can transition in that way. Or to say, hey, and we get ready to go into our worship service. We're going to be celebrating Lord's Supper together, and so our lesson is going to help us prepare to do that. If you're coming out of a 9 o'clock service in a 10:30 small group, then you can just transition from that. We've talked about worship and experienced that as a group setting, but let's dig into this and really make sure we understand what the essence is. So there's some ways you can transition either way. Page 2 is the introduction, and it kind of helps us get focused in on the fact of that worship, what worship is, and that worship is not in a particular place, in a particular style, doing a particular thing in a certain way, and it helps you begin to help get people thinking maybe in larger terms, in broader terms than they thought of before. And again, your teaching tips are there. And it gives us an opportunity. This introduction helps you then move into teaching the text, which is coming from the book of Malachi, an Old Testament book. In fact, it's in the way it's listed in the Old Testament. It's the final book of the Old Testament. There, Malachi, and you're going to be looking there in chapter 1. I'm going to be focusing in on several verses there out of chapter 1, and so in teaching the text there on page 3. Again, you've got a little teaching tip there. It gives you some background info that I would encourage you to look through. and starts off by asking, I think, a very good question, which gets us all thinking about this thing of worship. Why do you come to worship on Sundays? You know, oftentimes we refer to our services that we have here at Dayspring and other congregations, wherever they meet, they refer to their services as a worship service, almost as if the worship can only happen in that place at that time in that particular way. And so we ask the question of why do we come to worship on Sunday? Basically, we're saying, why do you show up here at Dayspring on Sunday? And there's a variety of different answers, suggested answers. Obviously, you want to throw that out there to your group. Now, I know, hey, let's kind of cut to the chase in this, because what we're going to oftentimes get when we throw out a question like that is we're going to get the spiritualized old Sunday school answer, you know. But probe a little deeper. Let's make sure we're really thinking this through, and that we're really being honest about why we do come on Sundays. Hopefully, all of our motivations are pure and all of our motivations are right, but the reality is they may not be. And there may be some Sundays we come in a way that we shouldn't come, or we're not coming in the right way or a way to truly connect with God and connect with others. So I think it's good for us to honestly probe into that a little bit. And as you look through there on page 3, you're going to see that basically what we find out for many of us is the reason we come is something about us, and it's for us. It's for me. It's all about us. And as we're going to discover, that's not worship. What worship is about. Now move over to page 4, and there we begin to get into the text itself. And you begin to work your way through verses 6 through 14. By the way, I would encourage you to read the whole book of Malachi. It's a short book. You can read the whole book because the context of that is very important. And the other aspects of that, the other couple of chapters there will help you kind of put together some of the things that you're going to be focusing in on in Malachi chapter 1. And so just take a few minutes and read through the whole book, maybe several times, just there as you prepare to teach this text, and just get the big overall picture of what's happening here. Now, as you look at that, you're going to have someone to read Malachi 1, 6 through 14. Hey, that might be you as the leader, facilitator. You may have someone who's really comfortable doing that. Go ahead, as I always encourage, to sign that out in advance, so you're not just going to say, hey, who would like to read Malachi, and no, everybody kind of stands there, and you hear the crickets chirping, and everybody looks at one another, but nobody volunteers. So go ahead and get that set up front, and so somebody's ready to do that, and you can go ahead and get into the text there in that way. And what you're going to find out is, as you're looking in there, is that what was happening here is the people of that day were worshiping God in a way that was not honoring to God. And they were worshiping in a way that the focus was on themselves and how they could basically do the least they could in the least way they could to carry out what they felt was their obligation of worship, their duty, so to speak, there. Now, and what happened was their worship became very self-oriented. God rebuked them about it. And by the way, he uses some pretty strong language there. And as you read through there, you'll notice too, quite a bit of sarcasm in that there, because God was saying, this is important stuff. This is something you don't need to take lightly. And he was wanting them to understand the significant nature of worship, how significant it was for them, how significant it is to him, and that it be done in a way that is honoring to God, a way that honors the name of God. You'll kind of see that in your text as you go there. A question to ask about the pattern that was being repeated in these verses, where basically God is reminding them that the focus of worship is to be on him. God says this worship is about me. It's not about you. It's about me. It's about our focus should be on God. And by the way, I don't think I have to drive this point home, but boy, isn't it easy for us to fall into the place where worship becomes about us? And I'm probably going to state the obvious here, but it becomes about us, about the style, the place, the way it's done, the order of the quote worship service sometimes gets in the way of that. even the decor of a room, or lack of decor, or no decor, or too much, all of that stuff. And what happens is the focus becomes about us instead of about God. Now, I understand there are some things that help us and some things that are in place that can encourage genuine, authentic worship. But listen, really, we ought to be able to worship God no matter what our surroundings are like. Okay, and that's really the point that we're getting there. Now, and that's why we talk about that. You got the one who is worth. If we're worshiping based on a certain style or a certain place or a certain decor, we're basically saying we're worshiping that thing rather than worshiping God. And by the way, nothing is worth your worship but God and Him alone. Now, on page 5, we come to the second major point where we mentioned earlier that worship should involve offering something worth offering. And you're going to look at Malachi 7 through 14 on that. And basically, it's interesting that God makes a charge. God issues a strong charge against those who were responsible for leading the people to worship. They were the responsible for helping create an environment for people to worship, and God really speaks strongly to them. And what was happening was the people were bringing offerings that were not worth bringing to God. They were basically bringing things that were of no value to them, and they were offering those to God, and that spoke very highly, by the way, of how they valued God. When we bring that to God that is of no value to us, then it's going to reflect directly on how we value God. And that happens today as well. And oftentimes we think of that in a financial way, and in our offerings, our financial offerings. And that obviously is a very important part of that, but it's not all of that. There's a lot that we bring to offer to God in our worship, not just our dollars, but in our abilities, the giftedness God has put in us, our time, our energy, our enthusiasm. Let me tell you this too. In just our own spirit, in the way we come across, our attitude, and how we participate or don't participate. It amazes me that many times we choose to participate or not participate because there's some particular element there that we don't like. Personally, it's a personal preference. We don't like it. So we say, you know what, I'm not going to participate at all. And we'll just kind of cross our arms and, give that attitude of defiance, attitude of rebellion, and say, I just dare someone make me want to try to worship God because I don't like this particular part of that. Folks, that is an attitude that we bring to God, and we got to understand that attitude that we bring is just as significant as all these other things, and it is dishonoring to God as much as anything else is, because we're basically saying, God's not, what we're saying in that? I value what I like and the way I like it and the way I want it more than I value God Himself. Now just let that sink in for a few minutes, okay? Because I believe that's exactly what we're saying, even though we don't realize that or think that through there. So, and you've heard this old statement before, well, that's good enough for church. As if, or that's good enough, it's like, hey, I can't use it anywhere else, but I can give it to the church. And I can't tell you how many times in my life, in my ministry life, and I've been in ministry like 30 plus years, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say that. Hey, I've got this old what that we don't have any use for it anymore. Do you think the church could use it? And I understand. I understand. They think they're being helpful. But folks, let me just say this honestly. If it's not good enough for you, why would it be good enough for God? What does that say about how we value God, what we think of God? And that's kind of the whole point of what you're getting here. In fact, at the bottom of page 5, a little paragraph there, it talks about, in fact, the worship had gotten to such a place that, you know what God said? He said, hey, let's just shut the doors. Let's just close this place down. I'd rather shut down the whole operation than see this kind of worship. Because, by the way, it's not worship, and it's not being helpful, and it's not being honoring to me. So God just basically says, let's shut the thing down. And, and you may kind of react to that in one of two ways. Well, why? That's not good, God, because there are some people who genuinely want to worship. Some people, and if you're shutting it down, they're not going to be able to do that. That's true. But the other side of that coin is, why should God allow worship that is offensive, that is not authentic, that is dishonoring Him, that is basically devaluing God Himself, and by the way, is not carrying out what worship should always be. And worship should always be that which honors God, exalts God, that raises up God, where God is known not only to those who worship Him, but God is known to those who don't worship Him. So that God in our worship and what we worship and how we worship is known, we make God known. And by the way, that happens not just inside of a building 1 hour a week. That happens outside that building in everything we do and how we live life, because worship is not confined to just a particular place in a specific time. Worship is what we should be doing 24/7, because we are worshiping God in all that we do and how we do it. So that, by the way, leads me to the application moment. Because your application moment there, I believe it's on, let's see, I've kind of got my pages out. Whoops, I missed a point. Back up. My bad. The third point, which is we want to make sure that I just led into. I got ahead of myself. The third point is, in order for worship to be worth something, it should result in other people worshiping God too. In other words, what I just said, our worship should be that which is contagious. And the nature of it, the value of it, the quality of that should be that which is contagious, so that other people are drawn to worship God because we worship God. Other people are drawn to know God because of how they see we valuing God, honoring Him there. And that's what true worship looks like. It really reveals who God is. Okay, now page 7 is the application moment. And tells you about that. Again, I always mention this. Don't miss that. I know time can get away and things happen there, and you can get involved, but try to leave some time for this application moment. I think it is so helpful, and also just kind of ties a bow in everything, puts a knot in it, and brings it back home. And by the way, the application handout that you have there, that is on page, I believe, 9 there for us. It's got some very insightful things to think through as a group, especially the number 3, point number 3. So use that. Again, make it fit your setting. If it worked for you to divide your group up into smaller clusters and do that, or if you do it as an open group, however it works for you, use it. And I think you'll find it be helpful having people walk out with just not, hey, this is what it means, but now this is what I'll do with it. Page 8 is the conclusion, and our memory verse there for the week there as well. And look forward to celebrating together with you this Sunday as we share in the Lord's Supper together in our large group gatherings, and then as we kind of get into this text and talk about worship perhaps on a more personal, intimate level for us as individuals or small groups there. Have a great time together this Sunday. Thanks for what you do, and God bless.